In 1847 Louisiana, a young woman vanished from a rain-soaked plantation, and a man recorded only as property may have written his own fate. Was it escape, murder, or something far stranger? Discover the unsolved mystery that has haunted St. James Parish for over 170 years. Welcome to one of the most chilling cases ever recorded in Louisiana's history. Before we dive in, I encourage you to leave a comment with where you're watching from and the exact time you are listening to this narration. We're curious to see which locations and at what times of day or night these accounts reach people. The story begins with a small notice in the St. Charles Herald on April 14, 1847. Tucked between advertisements for cotton gins and medicinal remedies, a column read, "Missing Mrs. Evelyn Duval, wife of plantation owner Gerard Duval, last seen the evening of April 10th. Reward offered for information leading to her safe return." What appeared initially to be a simple disappearance would unfold into one of the most unsettling cases Louisiana has ever seen. An incident that official records would later scrub from history, yet its echoes still linger in the cypress swamps of St. James Parish. The Duval plantation stood majestically along the Mississippi River, a two-story white mansion supported by 12 imposing columns stretching across its front. On the surface, it embodied everything the antebellum South celebrated: wealth, stability, and strict social hierarchy. Parish records show that Gerard Duval acquired the estate in 1839 following his father's death. Ledgers from the First Bank of New Orleans indicate he expanded the property significantly, purchasing neighboring lands and raising his workforce to over 100 enslaved people by 1845. Evelyn had arrived from Charleston in 1844, the daughter of a prosperous shipping merchant. Her marriage to Duval was arranged to strengthen family business ties. The couple's wedding announcement in the New Orleans Picayune described Evelyn as a woman of extraordinary beauty and refinement, certain to grace Louisiana society with her presence. However, surviving letters from Evelyn to her cousin in Virginia, discovered in a family archive in 1952, reveal a darker story. 3 months after arriving, she wrote, "The air here feels suffocating. The house is like a museum, and I am both exhibit and visitor. Parish documents note that Henry Carter was purchased at the New Orleans slave market in January 1846. His bill of sale, later found among Duval estate papers during a 1964 survey, described him as a man of about 26, literate, skilled in carpentry, healthy in body and temperament." A rare note at the bottom, likely in Gerard Duval's own handwriting, instructed that he serve in the house and manage the library. Following this acquisition, the plantation appeared calm. Accounting books from 1846 show profits steadily increasing from sugarcane production. Gerard Duval's name frequently appears in parish meeting minutes, often advocating stricter rules controlling enslaved people's movements between plantations. A journal belonging to Margaret Fontaine, the wife of a neighboring planter, mentions Evelyn at social events, describing her as quiet, almost invisible, though her eyes seem to observe everything. A Christmas 1846 entry noted that Mrs. Duval appeared unusually distracted during the sermon and excused herself before the meal was served. As winter gave way to spring in 1847, the plantation's careful order began to show cracks. A ledger entry from March 3rd noted disciplinary action for Henry Carter in the mistress's private sitting room without permission. Another entry on March 21st reassigned him to field duties as punishment. Curiously, an entry dated March 28th returned him to household work with a note, "At mistress's insistence, H.C. returned to library management." April 10, 1847, brought multiple events that would change everything. The overseer's daily report noted that Gerard Duval had left for New Orleans on business, expected back in 3 days. The plantation manager's weather journal recorded heavy rain starting at sunset and lasting through the night. The last sighting of Evelyn was by the cook, who later told investigators that she had requested tea be brought to the library around 8 in the evening. By the next morning, both Evelyn Duval and Henry Carter had vanished. A search of unprecedented scale began across St. James Parish. Duval returned from New Orleans and immediately organized parties to comb the swamps and inspect every road leading away from the plantation. The New Orleans Daily Crescent reported on April 17th that 50 men with dogs had scoured the wilderness, searching for Mrs. Duval, feared abducted by a runaway slave. Notices reached as far north as Natchez and as far east as Mobile. The official story quickly centered on abduction. The Baton Rouge Gazette headline on April 21st read, "Respected planter's wife taken by slave." Gerard Duval claimed Henry had shown signs of instability and an unhealthy obsession with Mrs. Duval due to their shared love of books. Multiple Southern newspapers offered a $1,000 reward for Evelyn's return and the capture, dead or alive, of Henry Carter. Yet contradictions appeared almost immediately. Rachel, an enslaved woman serving as Evelyn's lady's maid, told parish authorities that her mistress had been gradually packing a small valise for days to avoid notice. This testimony was removed from official records, but preserved in Sheriff Thomas Wilkinson's private notes, discovered after his death in 1861. More revealingly, an inventory of Evelyn's belongings showed not only clothes and personal items missing, but also books from the library, works by Voltaire and Rousseau, ordered from New Orleans the previous autumn. Gerard Duval insisted Henry had taken them, using them as proof of his crime. During the second week of the search, a riverboat captain reported seeing a white woman and a black man boarding his vessel 10 miles downriver from the Duval plantation on the morning of April 11th. They purchased passage to New Orleans, disembarking and vanishing into the city. According to the captain, they spoke little, but sat close together, and the woman wore a dark veil the entire journey. When asked if she seemed distressed, he replied, "No more than any woman traveling with a man." From that point, the trail grew cold. Extensive searches in New Orleans, particularly in areas known for harboring runaways or free people of color, found no confirmed sightings. Rumors suggested they may have boarded a ship to Haiti, though records show no passengers matching their descriptions. Over time, the public narrative shifted. The Picayune published a June article hinting that Evelyn's marriage may have been troubled from the start, suggesting cruel treatment that could have driven her to escape. Gerard Duval threatened legal action, and reporting reverted to the abduction narrative. By autumn, the case faded from public attention. In December 1847, Duval sold the plantation and returned to France, citing unhappy memories. The plantation house burned in 1849, officially from lightning, though rumors suggested arson. The case might have remained forgotten if not for a discovery in 1958. Workers renovating an old townhouse in the French Quarter found a sealed tin box hidden in a wall cavity. Inside was a water-damaged journal bearing the inscription, "Property of Ed." Tulane University historians dated it to the mid-19th century based on paper and ink. Only fragments were legible, revealing a story at odds with official accounts. An early 1846 entry reads, "G treats his books with more care than he ever showed me. H understands them as well, speaks of authors I never expected anyone here to know." Later entries note, "H and I discussed Rousseau today while G attended to the mill machinery. He has learned knowledge I cannot imagine despite all barriers." By winter 1846, the tone darkens. G looks at H with suspicion and malice when he thinks I do not notice. I fear what might happen. He struck me today when I objected to H's reassignment to the fields. If only he knew my thoughts now. The final undated entry, presumably from early April 1847, reveals the plan. We have agreed. When G goes to New Orleans, the riverboat at dawn, H says there are people who can help us reach Philadelphia. I take only what cannot be replaced. My heart races with fear and hope, the first true hope I have felt since coming here. The journal's discovery renewed historical interest. A 1962 article in the Journal of Southern History described it as a rare case of voluntary escape across racial lines, though this interpretation remains debated. In 1964, Philadelphia archives revealed a marriage certificate for Ellen Davis and Harold Carter, free-colored persons, dated October 3, 1847. Tax and city records show Harold ran a small carpentry business until 1853, after which the couple possibly moved to Canada following the Fugitive Slave Act. No further official records exist. Gerard Duval died in Paris in 1857 without heirs and never remarried. In 1966, an archaeological survey of the former plantation uncovered a root cellar with charred debris, including a woman's pearl hair comb, a carpenter's measuring tool marked HC, and fragments of a letter addressed to "My Dearest E," dated April 7, 1847. The letter contains chilling lines: "Cannot delay any longer. He would sooner see you dead." What truly happened at the Duval plantation remains unclear. Parish death records list no Evelyn Duval nor any remains. Local folklore suggests sightings of a well-dressed white woman and black man walking hand in hand along the river path, always looking back as if pursued. Martha Johnson, born into slavery on a neighboring plantation, claimed in a 1963 oral history that Evelyn and Henry had secret notes hidden in books, and that the master may have discovered them before they could leave, leaving their fate unknown. The plantation remained abandoned until 1973, when the land was purchased for industry. Workers reported strange occurrences: disappearing tools, sudden cold spots, and the smell of smoke in areas where no fire had burned. The company's development failed, citing environmental concerns, though staff later spoke of unease and dread at the site. Today, the former plantation is part of a wildlife management area, accessible only by boat. Visitors occasionally report hearing whispered conversations carried on the wind, though no one else is present. Rangers dismiss these as natural sounds combined with legend. In 2008, an LSU history professor located a rusted metal box exposed by flooding. Inside was a water-damaged leather-bound journal. One readable fragment states, "If we are not discovered, this journal will stay hidden. We shall begin new lives under new names, somewhere we might exist together. If the worst occurs and we are separated by death or capture, perhaps someone will someday read this and know the truth of what existed between us, not what they claimed. Not a crime or abduction, but the only freedom either of them had ever truly experienced." The professor suffered a stroke while still working in the field and was unable to record the exact location of his discovery. When a research team returned later, the box could not be found. The professor's field notes were considered unreliable due to his medical condition, and scholarly interest in the case faded once again. In the parish courthouse, the official record of the Duval case is still filed under unresolved crimes and abductions, a thin folder containing yellowed newspaper clippings and the original missing person report. The alternative story of an unlikely alliance, a desperate flight, or possibly a concealed murder exists only in fragments scattered through university archives, folklore collections, and whispered accounts still occasionally told by the oldest families in St. James Parish. The ultimate fate of Evelyn Duval and Henry Carter remains unknown. Whether they found freedom together in the North, met a violent end at the hands of a jealous husband, or now exist only as restless spirits along the Mississippi, their story continues to echo through the heavy Louisiana air. It serves as a reminder of a time when crossing the boundaries of race could cost everything, when the lines between captor and captive, victim and perpetrator, love and ownership blurred under the shadow of the plantation house. For those who have ventured to the overgrown site where the Duval mansion once stood, there is a strange quality to the silence that hangs over the clearing. It is not the calm quiet of abandoned places, but something anticipatory, as if the cypress trees and tall grass are holding their breath, waiting for a story to finally reach its proper end. Yet, like so many dark chapters in our history, perhaps some endings are deliberately hidden, some stories intentionally left unfinished, their final pages scattered to prevent anyone from ever knowing the full truth. Perhaps in this case, that uncertainty is itself a fitting memorial to a woman who vanished from history's pages as completely as she disappeared from that rain-soaked plantation on an April night in 1847, and to a man history recorded only as property, yet who may have found a way to write his own ending. In 1979, a graduate student in anthropology interviewed elderly residents of St. James Parish for a thesis on oral history traditions. One interviewee, William Thibodeau, then 87, shared an account passed down through his family. According to Thibodeau, his grandfather had been part of the search party organized after Evelyn's disappearance. Granddaddy said they weren't really searching for Mrs. Duval at all. His recorded interview states, "Mr. Duval knew exactly where she was. They were hunting Henry, plain and simple." When pressed for further details, Thibodeau recounted a troubling alternative version. The story his grandfather had told, which he said he wasn't supposed to repeat, claimed that Mrs. Duval had been caught trying to leave. Mr. Duval had locked her in the cellar for 3 days. Henry tried to help her escape again, and that's when things went wrong. The search parties weren't hunting 2 runaways. They were covering up what Mr. Duval had done. Partial corroboration for this account appeared in 1848 correspondence between the parish sheriff and the governor's office, uncovered during a 1962 reorganization of state archives. The letter, marked confidential, referred to the regrettable Duval situation and suggested that some influential figures believed it was best to leave the matter closed, given Mr. Duval's departure from the state and the impossible complications that further investigation would cause. A series of surveys in the 1980s using early ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath the former house site, which experts identified as consistent with a root cellar or similar underground structure, but no excavation was allowed. The land had changed hands multiple times, and the current owners refused access for archaeological study, citing concerns about disturbing historical remains. In 1983, renovations to an old church in Philadelphia's Northern Liberties neighborhood revealed a hidden compartment under the pulpit containing documents related to the Underground Railroad. Among them was a list of individuals who had passed through the church between 1847 and 1851. An entry from November 1847 mentions Ed and H.C. from Louisiana, provided with papers and funds for passage to Canada, a woman recovering from injuries, both traumatized but determined. This document sparked renewed interest in the possibility that Evelyn and Henry had indeed escaped north. Yet extensive searches of Canadian census records and community archives in cities like Toronto and Montreal found no definitive evidence of their settlement there under either their real names or known aliases. The mystery deepened in 1991 when a descendant of Gerard Duval's French relatives discovered a locked journal among family heirlooms in Paris. The journal, written in French from 1848 to 1857, contains several references to Yvain. In a revealing 1851 entry, Gerard wrote, "I received word today that they believe she has been seen in Montreal. I will not pursue. Let the dead bury their dead. What was taken from me cannot be restored, and I have sworn to forget that name and face." A later entry, just weeks before his death in 1857, reads more ambiguously, "I dreamt of Louisiana again. The house in flames, her voice calling from below. I wake each night at 3 the hour when we found the cellar door open. Some sins cannot be escaped even an ocean away. I feel her presence growing stronger as my own strength fails." Historians interpret these entries in different ways. Some see proof that Evene survived and escaped to Canada, while others read a confession of murder between the lines, Gerard's guilt manifesting as nightmares and paranoia in his final years. In 2002, a hydrological survey of the Mississippi River Basin found unexpected evidence connected to the case. Soil samples near the former plantation contained traces of accelerants consistent with deliberate burning, contradicting the official account that the 1849 fire had been caused by lightning. More alarming were traces of human remains in deeper soil layers, though the fragmentary nature of the evidence made determining age, gender, or number of individuals impossible. When this information became public, descendants of neighboring plantation families came forward with stories passed down for generations. 3 separate accounts mention that, in the weeks following Evelyn's disappearance, enslaved workers from nearby properties had been ordered to dig at night on Duval land. One account specifically referenced activity around the house foundation and cellar. These workers reportedly never spoke openly about what they saw or did, even decades after emancipation, except in the vaguest terms. A journal entry from 1865 by a Union officer stationed in the parish during Reconstruction notes, "The locals, both white and colored, share a strange reluctance to discuss the ruins of the Duval plantation. When pressed, an elderly man told me only that some ground won't grow crops properly if it has been fed with the wrong kind of seed." The meaning of this cryptic remark is unclear, though the land has remained uncultivated since the war. In 2005, the Louisiana Historical Society commissioned a full review of all available evidence, bringing together historians, archaeologists, and forensic experts. Their 300-page report, published in 2007, concluded that while no single definitive narrative can be proven, most evidence suggests Evene Duval and Henry Carter likely died on or near the plantation in April 1847, possibly at the hands of Gerard Duval or his agents, with their bodies hidden to prevent discovery. The report included a minority opinion arguing that the Philadelphia and Montreal documentary evidence, while circumstantial, offered a reasonable case for their successful escape. This interpretation has inspired historical novels and a 2010 documentary, The Runaways of St. James Parish, which presents a romanticized version of Evene and Henry escaping to build new lives in Canada. In 2013, advanced ground-penetrating radar was finally permitted on the site. The survey revealed a previously undetected structure about 30 yards from the main house foundation, possibly a small outbuilding or storage cellar not in original records. Before excavation could start, unprecedented flooding of the Mississippi inundated the site, and when the waters receded, the anomaly could no longer be located. Today, visitors to the wildlife management area report eerie experiences near the former plantation. Park rangers have documented dozens of accounts describing sudden drops in temperature, the sound of a woman crying, or glimpses of 2 figures moving through the underbrush at dusk. Scientists attribute these to suggestion and natural swamp sounds, but locals see them as signs that something of Evene and Henry remains tied to the land, either as victims seeking justice or as spirits unable to complete their escape. The Parish Historical Society has a small exhibition on the case, presenting both the abduction and escape narratives without endorsing either. The display includes a reproduction of Evelyn's portrait from the Duval family collection in France, showing a young woman with dark hair and a solemn expression. her eyes looking past the viewer into the distance. Next to it is a blank frame where Henry's image would be if any had survived. A stark reminder of how fully enslaved people could be erased from historical records, their stories reconstructed only from fragments and omissions. In 2018, a historical fiction author researching the case found a document in a Montreal museum dated 1862. It appears to be a death certificate for an Ellen Carter née Davis, about 40 years old, born in the southern U.S., survived by her husband Harold and 2 children. A notation by the attending physician mentions her wish that certain items, including a journal and pearl comb, be preserved for history. Her husband respected this wish. No such items have ever surfaced in Canadian archives. Did Evelyn and Henry escape to live together, carrying secrets to their graves, or did they die at the Duval plantation, victims of the violent social system they defied? Or does the truth lie somewhere in between? Perhaps one escaped while the other perished. The case remains officially unsolved. The St. James Parish Sheriff's Department technically maintains an open file on Evelyn Duval's disappearance, though no active investigation has occurred in over a century. In the Louisiana State Archives, her case number is cross-referenced with Henry Carter's, one of the few official acknowledgments that their fates were linked. Historians of the antebellum South note that the Duval case, though unusually well documented, likely reflects countless similar stories lost to history, crossed boundaries, thwarted or achieved escapes, and lives erased from official records. In Dr. Elaine Montgomery's words, author of Silenced Histories, Race and Gender in the Antebellum South, Evine and Henry's story exists in the space between history and folklore, between proof and knowledge that was never written, between official narratives and whispered truths that subverted them. Perhaps the most moving interpretation comes from an anonymously published poem in Montreal, 1870, titled E and H. While no direct connection to Evine and Henry can be confirmed, the final stanza reads, "Two souls who fled across the line where freedom meets with fear, their names erased, their paths concealed, their whispers still we hear. Not ghost nor flesh, but memory, too stubborn to depart. The truth lies buried not in earth, but in the human heart." On moonless nights, when Louisiana air hangs heavy and cypress trees stand sentinel along the swamp, locals say the old plantation land still keeps its secrets. Some claim to hear whispers between 2 voices, one with the refined accent of Charleston society, the other with the careful cadence of a man who taught himself to read despite laws forbidding it. Whether these are restless spirits of lovers defying boundaries, echoes of a desperate escape, or simply the wind through Spanish moss may matter less than the story itself and what it shows about a nation still grappling with the shadows of its past. In 2021, on the 174th anniversary of the disappearance, a small marker was placed near the presumed Duval plantation site. It bears no names, dates, or claims, only a simple inscription. For those who sought freedom by any path, their story continues. The marker has become an unofficial pilgrimage site for historians, romantics, and the merely curious. Visitors often leave with more questions than answers, but also with a deeper understanding of how completely the past can vanish when powerful interests wish it erased, and how persistently it can resurface through fragments. A journal, a carpenter's tool, a pearl comb, a whispered story, a name on a passenger list, a notation in a margin. As for the final truth of what happened to Evelyn Duval and Henry Carter that rainy April night in 1847, perhaps it is fitting that the mystery remains. In its uncertainty lies a reflection of a nation still struggling to reconcile its ideals with its realities, still uncovering stories deliberately buried, still listening for voices long silenced, but never truly gone. Some say that if you stand at the edge of the former Duval property on April 10th, as evening falls and the first spring raindrops begin, you can hear them, not calling in fear or pain, but speaking in quiet, urgent tones of possibility, of escape, of a future reclaimed from those who would deny it. Not ghosts, but something far stronger. A story that refuses to end where others decided it should. A truth emerging slowly, fragment by fragment, into the light.